Well, I'm absolutely thrilled on behalf of DURA and Dundee University to welcome Kirsty Logan. Thanks for coming along.
Thank you.
And just kind of by way of introduction, what kind of attracted you to the festival? What brought you here?
Well, lovely Peggy Hughes invited me, and I basically will do whatever Peggy Hughes invites me to do because she knows about books, and whatever she programs is usually pretty cool. I'm also on with Caris Bray, who is a writer that I really, really like. I just quite recently read her debut book, which is a story collection, and it's just really amazing. So I was very keen to be on with her as well. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Right, great. And just to get us into it, would you mind reading one of your short stories for us?
Sure.
I know I'd go for Rental Heart, if you don't
Do
mind.
you want to
but,
Rental Heart?
yeah,
Okay, sure.
I really like that one. But
So I'll read the title story from The Rental Heart and Other Fairy Tales, which I wrote when I was in my early 20s, and I had just been dumped, like you do, and I thought to myself, it's really horrible being dumped. I wish that I could just take my heart out and get a new one, because I'm quite literal. Really, I write fantasy, but a lot of it's quite literal. I wrote a story about rental hearts. So, the day after I met Grace, her pierced little mouth, her shit-kicker boots, her hands as small as goosebumps, writing numbers on my palm. The day after I met her, I went to the heart rental place. I hadn't rented in years, and I doubted they would have my preferred model. The window display was different. The hearts sleeker and shinier than I remembered. The first time I'd rented, it was considered high-tech to have the cogs tucked away. Now, they were as smooth and seamless as a stone. Some of the new hearts had extras I'd never seen, like timers and standby buttons and customized beating patterns. That made me think about Grace, her ear pressed to my sternum, listening to the Morse code of her name, and my own heart started to creep up my throat, so I swallowed it down and went into the shop. An hour later, I was chewing lunch and trying to read the instruction leaflet. They made it seem so complicated, but it wasn't really. The hearts just clipped in, and as long as you remembered to close yourself up tightly, then they could tick away for years, decades probably. The problems came when the hearts got old and scratched. Shreds of past loves got caught in the dents, and they're tricky to rinse out. Even a wire brush won't do it. But the man in the rental place had assured me that this one was factory fresh, clean as a kitten's tongue. Those heart rental guys always lied, but I could tell by the heart's coppery sheen that it hadn't been broken yet. I remembered perfectly well how to fit the heart, but I still read the leaflet to the end as a distraction. A way to not think about how Grace looked when she bit her lip, when she wrote the curls of her number. How she would look later tonight when we... It was very important that I fit the heart before that happened. 10 years ago, first heart. Jacob was as solid and golden as a tilled field, and our love was going to last forever, which at our age meant 6 months. Every time Jacob touched me, I felt my heart thud wetly against my lungs. When I watched him sleep, I felt it clawing up my esophagus. Sometimes it was hard to speak from the wet weight of it sitting at the base of my tongue. I would just smile and wait for him to start talking again. The more I loved him, the heavier my heart felt, until I was walking around with my back bent and my knees cracking from the weight of it. When Jacob left, I felt my heart shatter like a shotgun pellet, shards lodging in my guts. I had to drink every night to wash the shards out. I had to. A year later, I met Anna. She was dreadlocked, green-eyed, full of verbs. She smelled of rain and revolution. I fell. But the parts of me that I wanted to give to Anna were long gone. There was not enough left that was worth giving. The edges of my heart were jagged now, and I did not want to feel those rough edges climbing my throat. I did not love her enough to cough blood. I kept what was left of me close, tucked under the long, soft coils of my intestines where Anna wouldn't see. One night, still throbbing, Anna opened her chest. Her heart nestled, a perfect curl of clockwork. "This is how," she said. I could hear its tick against the soft embrace of her lungs, and I bent close to her to smell its metallic sharpness. I wanted. The next day she took me to the heart rental place. I spent a long time pressing my palms against the polished metal until I found one that felt warm against my skin. I made sure that the sharp edges of the cogs were tucked inwards, kept away from the just-healed rawness of my throat. Back at Anna's, she unwrapped the plastic, fitted the heart, closed my chest, took me to bed. Later, I watched her sleep and loved her with every cog of my heart. When Anna ran off with my best friend, I took the heart back to the rental place. Nothing choked or shattered or weighed me down. It looked just as sleek shiny as when I had first taken it out of the wrapping, and the rental guy gave me my full deposit back. I deleted Anna's phone number and went out for dinner. The next year, when I met Will, I knew what to do. The heart this time was smaller, more compact, and it clipped into place easily. Technology moves fast. Will taught me about Boadicea, the golden section, musical intervals, Middle English. I soaked him up like I was cotton wool. Sometimes, pre-dawn, I would sneak into the bathroom and open myself to the mirror. The heart reflected Will back at me, secure in its mechanics. I would unclip it, watch it tick in my fist, then put it back before sliding into Will's arms. On our first holiday, I beeped through the airport barriers. I showed my heart and was waved on. It wasn't until the plane was taxiing that I realised Will had not beeped. I spent the whole flight wire-jawed with my paperback open to page 1, unable to stop thinking about the contents of Will's chest. We never mentioned it. I couldn't stand to think of his chest cavity all full of wet red flesh. When I left Will, I returned the heart again. I couldn't sleep for the thought of his heart, shot into shards, sticking in his guts, scratching up his gullet. After that, I rented hearts for Michael and Rose and Genevieve. They taught me about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and how to look after a sausage dog. They smelled of petrol and hair oil and sawdust and honeysuckle. Soon the heart rental guy started to greet me by name. He gave me a bulk discount and I got invited to his Christmas party. Soon I found that halfway between sleeping and waking, the glint of the rental guy's gold incisor would flicker at the corners of my eyes. I wondered if he licked the hearts before renting them to me, so molecules of him would be caught down in some tiny hidden cog, merging into my insides. The glint of the rental guy in my dreams started to make me uncomfortable, so I switched to a new rental place. There were plenty to choose from, and I preferred the ones that didn't gleam their teeth at me. They never gave me back my security deposits, but always kept their stares on the scratched glass counter when I returned the hearts. Their downturned eyes were more important than the shine of coins. As I got older, the hearts got smaller. After Genevieve, I moved away for a while to an island where I knew no one and nothing, not even the language. I lived alone. I didn't need to rent a heart. My empty chest made it easy to breathe, and I filled my lungs with the sharp air of the sea. I stayed there for a year. Back in the city, back in the world, among words and faces I knew, one night, many drinks, and Grace's number scrawled tiny on my skin, the sleek, shiny new heart. I swallowed the rest of my lunch and went home to fit the heart. 3 years later, autumn afternoon, curled on the couch with newsprint on my fingers and Grace's dozing hair in my lap. a small notice in the corner of the page. Product recall. Heart model number 34527J. Defective. I pressed my hand, the hand holding the dark length of Grace's hair, against my chest. I hadn't opened myself in years, trusting the tick of the heart. I'd kept it for so long that I knew I'd have lost my deposit, but I hadn't wanted to return it, to lose the image of Grace coiled in the centre of it. I slid out from under Grace. She mumbled half awake, then quietened when I slipped a cushion in under the heat of her skull. I tiptoed into the bathroom and opened the rusted hinges of my chest. The heart was dusty and tarnished and utterly empty. In the centre of it was no picture of Grace, no strands of her hair, no shine of memories, no declarations. The rusting metal squealed when I pulled it out.
Right, great, thanks. I always think it's great to have, writing spoken the way kind of the writer hears it when they write it. You said at the beginning that you wrote it after a breakup. Is a lot of your writing inspired by kind of real life things that happened to you?
Yeah, a lot of it actually. I think quite often when difficult things happen, big emotional, dramatic things like a loss or grief or something like that, it's really hard to get your head around them. It's really hard to just accept that terrible things happen and you just have to deal with it. And for me, that kind of lens of mythology and of metaphor just helped me to express the way that it feels. So, for example, there's a story in the book called The Light Eater, which is about someone who literally eats lights. She eats fairy lights, progresses to light bulbs more and more, because she's lost somebody and the world looks very dark without that person, and so literally she would eat light. And I wrote that quite soon after my dad died, very suddenly when I was 27. And it's dark. When you lose someone, it's really dark. And the thing that's so difficult about these big losses is it's actually very simple, that someone is gone and you wish that they weren't gone. And it's such a simple thing, but it's so hard to express, and it's so hard to get across the intensity and the depth of that feeling. And for me to write about that in a metaphorical way, it helps me to get through it, and it helps me to speak to someone who might be having a similar experience. They might have lost someone, they might have felt that they want to take their heart out and get a new one, or they might have felt like the world is so dark that they want to take light inside them. Quite often it's from life, and it's just me thinking of the way that I feel and then taking it very literally and writing a kind of fantastical story where these things literally happen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, I suppose, do you think that's kind of, I was going to ask you about what you think the purpose of books are on a more kind of general level, like what their place is in the world, if you like. So do you think that kind of ties into that as well?
Yeah, I think books have many different purposes. I think a book can provide anything that you want it to. You can use it just for sheer escape, and I think that the use of fiction as escapism is really underrated, because sometimes you just need that. If you're going through a hard time, why not have some escapism? Why not just take yourself away from the situation for a while? And I think there's no shame in that. We talk often about guilty pleasures or things like that. They shouldn't be guilty. If something helps you through, then I don't think that there's any guilt in that. So I think books can be just pure escapism. I think that they can help us to understand ourselves. They can help us to understand other people, people who are in different circumstances to ourselves, or who've gone through different experiences. They can really help us to see things from someone's perspective that perhaps a set of facts and figures or a news report wouldn't necessarily get us inside that person's head. But I mean, a book can do so much more. You can prop up your table with it. That's still a useful use of a book. It can be anything you want. I find books very comforting as well. Just having them around. I like to have books in my house as decoration as well.
Me too.
I always think if I go into someone's house and they haven't got any books, it doesn't look quite right. It looks like something's missing.
Yeah, books are definitely kind of comforting.
Yeah, and you can judge people from them. If you are thinking of going out with someone and you go to their flat and you can look at what books they've got and think, do I really want to go out with this person based on their choice of books? So that's, there's tons of uses of books.
And I suppose this kind of leads into it as well. Do you do that thing where you buy a load of books and never get around to reading them?
Oh, yeah. Actually, there's a word in Japanese for that. And what is it? Is it sandoku, I think it is.
All right.
Which means the act of buying a book, which then goes on a pile of other books that you haven't read. And then, buying more and more. I have literally probably in the thousands now of books that I will read. But I just haven't yet. It comes from, for a long time, I was a bookseller all through, actually I started when I was still at school. I had a Sunday job in a bookshop.
Oh, right.
I did that all through school, all through uni. I had this Sunday job and worked in the holidays in the bookshop, so you end up with just ludicrous quantities of books. Because you get these proofs, these like advance publication copies of the books. So there would be books from events, obviously things that you saw in the shop and would buy. And then for years I was a reviewer, and then I was a literary editor for a while as well, so I've just ended up with like so many books that I really want to read all of them, so I can't get rid of them because I want to read them. It would be nice, maybe this will be my next story, it would be nice if there was like a time machine, but where you could just pause time just to catch up on reading. That would be
good.
Really good. Yeah. Maybe that would be my next literal fantasy story, will be someone who can literally stop time to catch up on reading. I wouldn't even want to do anything. I would just sit and read for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll look forward to that one.
Yeah.
Did you always know you wanted to be a writer? And did the book selling have anything to do with that?
It's tricky because I think when you look back on your life, things have a really clear path. But at the time it didn't look clear. So I did always write. I wrote ever since I was a kid. I was a really kind of bookish, nerdy child. I came from a kind of bookish family as well.
Yeah.
My mum was a bookseller, actually. My dad worked in a bookshop for a while as well. So like really bookish people. And I remember in the... bookish people, yeah. In the dining room of the house where I grew up, my dad had built these like built-in floor-to-ceiling bookcases, which were just full, like jam-packed with books. And he had said to me, you can read anything, because you couldn't do that with films. I wasn't allowed to see like 15s when I was 8, but I was allowed to read any books that I wanted. So of course I gravitated straight towards the ones that I knew I wasn't supposed to read. So like Stephen King, because I think one of them had boobs on the cover. There was like James Herbert, because one of them had this like demonic rat with bloody teeth, and I was like, I shouldn't read that. I'm going to read that. I read like George Orwell. Didn't really understand them at all. I remember reading this book by J.G. Ballard called Crash, which is about people who are sexually aroused by car crashes, which I really shouldn't have been reading, and it was horrendous. So awful. Yeah, but I think it was an interesting experience to just have that freedom and to have somebody say to me, you can read any of these. Because at the library, if you had a child's ticket, you couldn't take adult books out. I wasn't allowed to take adult books out of the library until I was, 14 or 15.
Right, yeah.
So that was really quite amazing just to have someone give you that freedom. Because as a child, you never have any freedom. Like, you just have to do what you're told all the time. So, I always had that very bookish childhood, and I always used to write stories. I actually won my first literary contest when I was 8, which is... we went to the... That sounds very highbrow, it wasn't. We went to the Enid... No, it wasn't Enid Blyton, it was...
I love Enid
who did
Blyton.
Peter Rabbit? Beatrix Potter.
Yes.
We went to the Beatrix Potter museum on a school trip, and then we had to write our own Beatrix Potter style story.
Right.
which I did. Mine was called The Tale of Felicity Fieldling, who's a field mouse, I think. And I won some book tokens for that. Yeah, there you go. So that was my first contest that I won. So yeah, I always did write, but then I did stop for a while because there seemed to be this gulf. That was me writing The Tale of Felicity Fieldling, and then there was, you know, J.G. Ballard and Stephen King, and I would think, how do you get from here to there? I couldn't see. Like, I knew that people wrote books. I knew that they didn't just appear out of the ether, but I didn't think that I could be a person that wrote them.
Yeah.
I thought I needed some sort of authority or magic golden key or like a little hat that said writer on it. I thought I needed something that I didn't have. So I stopped for quite a long time, and then I always loved books. I studied English at university. I did an English lit degree at Stirling, and then I did a postgrad in creative writing at Glasgow Uni. And it really wasn't until I was accepted onto that postgrad that I thought, oh, I actually can. I think I can do this. Because I applied for the course very, very late, doing that kind of self-sabotage thing where you do something kind of so that you will fail. So I applied for it really, really late, kind of knowing that I wasn't going to get in.
Right, yeah.
But I must have just got lucky and they had a place. So I did get on the course. And that's when I really started to take myself seriously. And then after I did that, I spent many years doing various awful minimum wage jobs. Like, I was a waitress for a long time. I worked in a call centre. I actually sold PPI. So, sorry.
Wow.
Sorry for anyone that's had to claim back their PPI. That was me. It probably actually wasn't me because I was a terrible, terrible salesperson. Because I knew even then that PPI was terrible. So if someone would sort of waver, I would go, no, just have a think about it. And then call me back tomorrow. Like, they would never call you back, obviously.
Yeah.
So you probably didn't buy it off me. It's okay. So yeah, I did all these just awful jobs. Like, they weren't awful, but they weren't fulfilling, you know. And just wrote as much as I could. Wrote in all my free time. It was all about books. I would go to poetry readings and go to book launches and kind of get involved in the community. And then just very slowly, you know, I know in films there's always this big, like, breakout moment where you get the call and you go, yeah, and then the world changes. It doesn't really work like that. It's a very slow process. You know, you get maybe one story accepted and then someone asks you to write another story and then maybe you have something on the radio and, you know, it builds up really, really gradually, and before you know it, you know, you're a full-time writer. Like, as of a few months ago, I was finally a full-time writer, but it happened slowly. So yeah, yes and no. I always knew that I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't really think that I could do it.
Right.
Until suddenly I was doing it.
Yeah. So it just kind of happened sort of unintentionally.
No, I mean,
not unintentionally, but just gradually, I guess.
Yeah. It's not as if one day I wasn't a writer and then the next day I was. It just
happened.
Yeah, it's like trying to break through a big wall, and you're chipping and chipping and chipping away at it, and slowly little bits are falling off, and then before you know it, you're through. But it's not like it all just crumbles at once. It's just like very gradual process. Well, for me, it'd be different for other people, but that's what it was for me.
And did you find your postgrad really kind of useful?
In some ways it was useful. I think with creative writing courses, it really depends what you're looking for. I think what I wanted, I didn't realise this is what I wanted, but in hindsight I can see that I wanted the golden key. I wanted the little hat that said writer on it. I wanted someone to give me a badge, or I wanted permission. I wanted someone to give me permission to take myself seriously and to write and, you know, be a writer. And no one can give you that. You have to take it.
Right, okay.
So I think it didn't help me in that way, because it's not as if I started the course not a writer and finished it a writer.
Yeah.
So it helped me in a lot of ways. It helped me in terms of getting a community. I'm still really close with this woman called Helen Sedgwick, who is also a writer, who I met on the course. And we are still in a critique group together. We have been for years, with another writer called Katie Macaulay. And we critique each other's work. We meet once a month. We've been through about 5 different novels each. So it's been a long time we've, you know, been working together, and I'm still in touch with a lot of the other writers that I met on the course. And it's been really nice the past few years. Everyone's kind of started to have books out and have launches, and we can all go to each other's events and things. So the sense of community's been really good.
Yeah.
But I don't think that a course can give you permission. It can help you with what you already have or what you already know, but it can't make you something that you're not.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Prize.
Oh yeah,
2013.
Mm-hmm.
How did that help? How did that change your career, I suppose?
Yeah, well,
did
I mean,
it change your career?
It did, because that's how my first book came out.
Yeah.
So unfortunately the Scott Prize isn't running anymore. It turns out that was the last one, which was a shame. But it was an annual prize for a writer who hadn't published a book before to have a short story collection. And when you write short stories, all you're ever told is nobody publishes short stories, go and write a novel. Which is fine. I write novels as well, but I love short stories and I will continue to write short stories. So I had written all these stories over the years, not really intending to put a collection together, because all I'd ever been told was nobody publishes short stories. So I had seen this call for this contest and I thought, well, I've got a lot of stories. I had over 100 stories by this point, so I thought,
wow.
I could probably put a collection together.
Yeah.
So I did. I just sort of grouped them, and it turned out that I had written a lot of these kind of fairy tale toned stories. They're not retellings of fairy tales, but they all have a kind of fantastical or magical realist slant to them. So
Right.
I thought, great, I have a lot of stories that fit. And I had to not include some stories that I was very fond of because they just didn't fit into the kind of theme of the collection.
Yeah.
And then I just entered the contest and just won. Never thought that would happen, but you know, you should always enter contests because someone has to win them, you know.
That is true.
And it might be you, so you might as well enter. But it's made a really big difference to have a book out. It may be true that nobody publishes or buys or reads short stories, but that hasn't been my experience. I've had done loads of events, festivals, lots of reviews. It's all been really good. I actually noticed today, I tend try not to look at reviews. I mean,
right, yeah.
It's hard because it is like picking a scab. You can't help it, even though you know it's bad for you. But someone linked me to my Amazon page today.
Right.
And so I looked at the reviews. And amazingly enough, all of the reviews are either 5-star or 1-star. So people really like it or just hate it. Doesn't seem to be much in the middle.
Yeah.
Which I find oddly reassuring, actually. I would rather that than they were all 3.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think I'd be the same.
Yeah. So it's changed a lot, but then also I think I needed to accept that having a book doesn't necessarily make me any more or less of a writer. You know, I still write the same stuff that I was writing before I had a book. It's just that now people are willing to buy it.
Yeah. So does it not feel any different?
I mean, it does.
Like, do you feel like you're a writer now in a sort of different sense than you did before?
Yeah, I guess because I can do it for a living.
Yeah.
Which is different. I mean, it's scary as well, though, to have readers can be quite scary because, you know, when you publish something and put it out in the world, you have to accept that not everyone's going to like it. People are going to give you 1-star reviews on Amazon and they're not going to hold back of how terrible they think the book is. And you can either balance it by looking at the 5 stars of people who liked it and think, oh, great, it's fine, some people do like it. Or you can just think, well, who wants to please everyone anyway?
Yeah.
But it's hard. Nobody likes getting a
course
1-star
not.
review. Like, everyone wants everybody to love their work, obviously, but that's not the way the world is.
Yeah.
So there are downsides to being published, I think, but for me, it's a good thing because, I mean, that's part of the point, is otherwise you would just write stories and put them in a drawer. You want to connect with people. I think part of why we write is to connect with people that we'll never meet. And I think the act of reading is so intimate that, you know, maybe going to the cinema or hearing a band is a very communal experience. And reading a book really can only really be one-on-one. Even if someone is reading aloud to you, the pictures that they're seeing in their heads it's different for every person.
Yeah.
And it's a completely personal experience. So I think that kind of intimacy with a stranger, someone who you will never meet, is really a wonderful thing. To have these strong emotions, these images, these characters that you've made up come alive in someone else's imagination who you'll never meet, who might be reading it, you know, long after you're dead, which I think is really amazing.
Yeah.
Makes it worth it. Makes the 1-star reviews worth it.
Definitely. Well, I guess just to finish off then, if you'd like to tell us a bit about your novel, which is coming out in spring.
It is, yes. So it's called The Gracekeepers, and it's based on a story that's in the collection called The Gracekeeper. So obviously there is more than one Gracekeeper in the novel. And my short description of it is it's about a circus boat in a flooded world.
That just sounds amazing.
So it's about North, works on a circus boat. She's a bear performer, so she performs with a bear. They do a dance, and the bear is only just tame. So she's kind of in this constant danger from this bear. And she meets a gracekeeper who is sort of a cross between a hermit and an undertaker. And they live this very isolated existence where they bury people who have died at sea. And these two women meet, and sparks fly, and they realise that they have a connection.
Right.
I won't give away any more.
That's perfect. Right. Thanks
you.
so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's really great to have you. Right. Thanks.